Hi everyone, I apologize for missing class on Thursday. I was going to introduce the annotated bibliography to you, which is just basically a way of organizing research. Hopefully this video is a suitable substitute. So the annotated bibliography is just a way of organizing research. You've probably done most of these steps before, not necessarily in this order and not necessarily in this way, but this should be relatively familiar ground. If it's not though, don't worry, we're still going to go step by step through the whole thing. So first of all, we've got two sections, A and B, of the annotated and bibliography. We're going to start with the B. The bibliography is, for our purposes, just a specially formatted list of texts, just a list of texts that you are looking at. And the annotated part of it is that it's just a way of formatting your notes on that text. If we put A and B together back in the right order, the annotated bibliography is a specially formatted list of texts with annotations beneath each entry. That special format for the citations, the list of text, is MLA format, and text for us just means sources in general, any source that you find. Annotations are just your notes on that text. So our primary concern here is finding good sources and making sure that we take good notes on those sources and that everything is formatted neatly. I realize that's three things. Those are our three primary concerns. So we're left with three questions. How do you find those sources? How do you format your citations? And how do you write your annotations? And those three are basically the rest of this video, how we're going to go through each of those. So finding sources is something that you've probably been told these three things before, I'd imagine. Don't use Wikipedia, that books are really good sources, and that reliable news sources are also very good sources. I hate all three of these pieces of advice, and you should throw them away right now. First of all, Wikipedia is a great resource and you should use it. You can't cite it, but it is a great resource for you to use in finding sources. Books are great if you are doing a very long-term project, but for most of you, this is one semester long, right? You're not going to have the time to sit down and read a whole bunch of books on something. So while books tend to be good sources, depending on who published them and what they're about, for our purposes, I would steer you clear of books. You just don't have the time to read a book. And then finally, reliable news sources being good sources is a tautology. If it's reliable is not a good argument. There is a general consensus now that much of the news is compromised. That's true in some cases and not so true in others. We're going to look at evaluating news sources in just a minute, but don't just assume that because something appears in print and then it gets put on a newsstand somewhere, or because it's online on an official-looking website, that it is at all reliable. That's not necessarily the case. So if we're going to use Wikipedia, here's how we do it. You use Wikipedia to familiarize yourself with your topic. Whenever I'm going to teach anything new, whenever I am going to introduce something that I haven't taught before, then I always go to Wikipedia, and my first step is to read the entire Wikipedia page, just because I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything major on that topic. And because Wikipedia is a wiki, which is a collection of hyperlinked articles, you can familiarize yourself with this kind of cloud that exists around your topic. So if there's a link that keeps appearing or something that seems particularly relevant, you can click that and read it too. And you get this kind of miasma around your topic that is it's informative, right? To know the supporting pieces of information around it. You can also source mine Wikipedia. Wikipedia citations are numerical. It's a supertext, I think. It might be the subtext, I'm not sure. But it's like 1, 2, 3, 4 that appear after each sentence that's being cited. And you can click on those and they'll take you to the bottom of the page. At the bottom of that page are those sources. So you can check to see if this is a source that looks good, and if it is, by all means, use it. Perhaps the most effective use of Wikipedia, though, is to collect search terms to use elsewhere. So whether those be movements or major figures or related ideas, you're collecting these terms that you can then plug into GSU's library homepage or into Google Scholar to return the results that you want. Collecting these search terms also gives you the idea of a narrative arc, so that when you do your research and you find more specific or academic sources, you know where those sources fit into that narrative arc, and it makes more sense because you're familiar with the story. So Assuming you have used Wikipedia to generate a list of search terms, you take those search terms to GSU's library homepage. You can just Google GSU library, or I think it's library.gsu.edu or something like that, and then click in the search box that's right there. If you want more information, it's going to ask you to log in if you're not on GSU's Wi-Fi, so go ahead and do that. And then use on the left-hand side of the results that information to limit your search. You want to limit by date, by PDF full text, by peer-reviewed journals, and basically you find articles that way. That's your best bet for finding articles. That said, Galileo, which is the collection of journal articles that you're searching when you use GSU's library homepage, the algorithm is not good. So it's going to return results that you don't want. Google has a much better algorithm, but a lot of what you get when you search Google Scholar is behind a paywall. So don't pay for anything there. So if you go to scholar.google.com and you search for things, you can find titles that you can then take back and then search within GSU's library homepage, and the exact title will likely get you the exact result. So these three things right here, Wikipedia, the GSU library homepage, and Google Scholar, this is where you want to stay when you are doing research. These three things right here, this triumvirate, is going to prop you up. Wikipedia gives you search terms, GSU's library gives you access to academic journals, and Google Scholar gives you a better algorithm for finding related topics that you can then plug back in to the GSU library. This is what it looks like when you have clicked on a source from Galileo from GSU's library homepage. When you click on this source, notice this little red circle over here in the center right that says Cite. Clicking on that will take you to a properly formatted MLA citation. This is another reason that it's a good idea to use GSU's library homepage and Galileo to find sources, because it's got the citations done for you already. When you click on that Cite button, it's going to pull up, this is a zoomed in view beneath you, this citation format. You have to scroll down on the side. You can see the scroll bar. I've scrolled nearly to the bottom to find MLA format. MLA format is what we're using. MLA is hideous. It is ugly. It is badly thought out. It is probably the worst citation style that there is. That said, it dominates English departments. And since this is a class under the English department, we use MLA. It's unfortunate, but there you have it. We can't all use Chicago. So I have here found this MLA citation. That's how it's supposed to be formatted. You'll notice this black bar that I've drawn on, this sort of upside down L. That is a hanging indent, which is very deeply important to me. So I'm going to show you over here. This is what it looks like when you try to tab the lines after the first one over. Sometimes it just doesn't work. That's Word trying to auto format. If you want it to work properly, all you have to do is hold Control and press Tab, and it will move those individual lines. So for writing the annotations, there's a couple of things you want to do. First, obviously, you want to read the article. Some of you are the kinds of people who are big abstract only readers, or you were first to Spark Notes when you were supposed to read Red Badge of Courage or whatever. Please read the whole article. Now, I know that you're not going to sit down and read word for word every single piece of something that's 40 pages long before you know if it's relevant or not. So this is why you read an abstract, is to determine whether or not an article is useful for you or if it's not related. If it is irrelevant, discard it. If it's relevant, though, the next step is not to read the whole thing, it's to skim the whole thing. You want to flip through it, look at the various sections, see how it's organized. Do they have a long part where they're talking about method and methodology? If that's important to you, you want to focus on it. If you're more interested in their results because you already know this is a reliable source, then you can skip straight ahead to the results or the discussion. Or it could be that this article is very similar to something that you want to do, and just like you source mine to Wikipedia, you might want to source mine an individual article, see what they're citing, and look at their sources, and those can also become sources for you, right? You look at the same source material. So after you've skimmed the whole thing and you've picked parts to focus on, you're going to close read those relevant sections. This is where you're doing your highlighting, your note-taking, you're really getting in depth with this individual source. And then again, you can skim those less relevant sections. By the time you're done going through an article and reading it, I want you to answer these questions. Who wrote it? What is the title? And when was it written? So this who, what, when is all surface information you can get just from the citation. author, title, and date. Those things, though, are really, really important. Knowing who wrote something can tell you a lot about whether what their position is. The title is how you'll sort of file it in your mind, and the date is especially important. For many of you, if you're working on something related to, say, design or computer programming or machine learning or whatever the case may be, anything that's sort of tech-oriented or contemporary in that sense, sources that are from even just a few years ago are going to be out of date. So you want to make sure you're dealing with really recent sources. The second set of questions, the second thing that I want you to write is why they wrote that. So what is their overall goal when they wrote this article? And then the third thing is, how did they approach that goal? How did they achieve that goal? And then finally, which I know is not a question, but you can say it in sort of a questiony way. And that's basically where you're saying, this is how it's especially relevant to me. If you will answer each of these four, and I know the first one's kind of three, but four questions, then that's the annotation. That's all the notes I want you to take. What that will do is it will provide a brief summary of what has gone on in the article that is especially relevant to what you're working on. And so when it comes time for you to write your paper at the end of the semester or closer to the end of the semester, then you will have already these notes that can remind you exactly of what you read. So you don't have to go back and reread the entire article. Or if you do, you know exactly what you're looking for. So that's about it. That's the annotated bibliography. Oh, one more thing. Source hierarchy. That's the last thing? Yeah. Source hierarchy, number one, journal articles. Please use the journal articles that you find on Galileo, which is through the GSU library website. 2 is news. Now, by news, I mean any source that comes from something like the Associated Press that is presenting only information. It's not presenting an opinion on that information. It's using non-value words. So instead of saying someone arrived in style, which an editorial or news in quotes might say, it would just say arrived. News is simply facts. And I understand some of you are going to say that even facts can be biased depending on how they're presented and which facts are left out. That's also true. But if you see in the language of something that's written that it's using value terms that have positive or negative connotations, then that's not news anymore. Editorials and op-eds, this is where it gets a little fuzzy. Basically, everything below number 2 should have a big question mark beside it. In some publications, the editorials are very good. This is when the editor writes an opinion piece that is sort of the stance of the newspaper, and then the op-ed usually appears opposite the editorial on the next page in a traditional newspaper, which is an opinion that goes against the editorial opinion. Use your best judgment in sources that are highly regarded or that seem very professional. Basically anything that is trying to get you to sign up for a subscription nowadays and says, I see that you're using an ad blocker. Those tend to be a little bit better than the ones that have just 1,000 ads everywhere and aren't trying to get you to sign up for anything, but are trying to get you to click on, sort of spammy clickbait articles. So BBC, right, is going to be a little bit better. New York Times is going to be a little bit better. But use your judgment there. Vox, even though you might agree with or like Vox, not really news. That would be more news in quotes. Twitter is on here because Twitter does have some really good uses, especially because it gives you access directly to people who might be involved in whatever it is that you're working on. So citing a specific person's verified Twitter feed might be a good source for you. On the whole, Twitter is not good. It can occasionally be useful. Again, this is sort of a use your judgment area. Finally, we have news in quotation marks. These are things that attempt to appear neutral and attempt to appear factual, but are inherently biased, both in the presentation of facts and also in the biased language that's used. So just keep in mind that most things, even if it qualifies as an official newspaper, I'm not a huge fan of. If you can stick to journal articles alone, that's best. If you spill a can of alphabet soup, that will be better than anything you find on Facebook or other social media. So just ignore all of that. You'll see off to the side, outside of the source hierarchy, I have interviews and primary research. This is stuff you can do that does count as a source. If you're doing interviews and other primary research, if you're doing that, then that's definitely a source that you can use, but the quality of that source depends on how you conduct that research. So I can't really place it in the hierarchy. At its very best, it goes above journal articles. It's really, really great. And you're certainly welcome to do primary research, and you're welcome to do interviews if you can get access to people. So I do believe that does it. That's it for annotated bibliographies. Again, please email me if you have any questions. Please feel free to slow down this video if I've talked too quickly, and I look forward to seeing you all Tuesday. Thanks. Have a good day.